For step 16, we need some parts from our parts bag. So from parts bag BA, we need 4 of the BA5s, which are the 3mm locking nuts. We need 4 of the BA6, which are the 3mm flange nuts. From our parts bag C, we need 8 of the 3x20mm screws. We need 4 of the 3x18mm step screws. We need 4 of the 3x14mm step screws. We need 4 of the rear suspension stays, and we need 1 of the propeller shaft. It's like a dog bone shaft. We also need, from parts tree F, we need F6s and F7s so that we can assemble these axles onto the chassis. So that's what I'm going to do next. So we are now completed step 16, which is putting the 2 differential cases and axles onto the chassis. And here we have it. So with the propeller shaft in, stabilizer arms in, the 2 differential cases in, and the flange nuts on this section and the locking nuts on this section. So yeah, there we are. We have the differentials working, and you had to make sure that when you popped these on, according to the drawing, you got the bulgy part here of the case on this one on the rear, and the bulging part on this side on here. So you have to make sure these are orientated the correct way. And yeah, there we are. So we are step 16 done. On to the next. And step 17, so we finish off the bag C, is some more parts from BA bag. The BA1s, which are the 3x15mm screws, the BA5s, which are 4 of the lock nuts, as you can see here. From the parts bag C, we need MB1s, which are the 3x14 step screws. We need these damper collars. We need 4 of these, MB3s, and we need 4 of our dampers that we built. And we're going to place the dampers onto the rear leaf spring suspension system of the model. And there we have step 17, and we've put on the chassis the dampers on the sections on both sides of the chassis. So turn the chassis over, there we go, and there you are, chassis now the other way, and you can see. So that's putting the F5 pieces, which are the plastic pieces, on there, and then bolting through and screwing through onto the chassis the dampers. So there you are. So that is step 17 completed. So just a quick recap as to where we are. We're up to step 17, and this is the chassis so far. It's looking quite nice, and it's the front of the chassis with your shift servo, steering servo, your main chassis rails, your leaf spring suspension system at the back, your leaf spring suspension system at the front. You've got your steering system at the front here too, as you can see, and the complex systems here, as you can see, and it's starting to gain a little bit of weight. If I turn over the chassis, there we are. So you can see the 2 rear differentials linked together, as you can see there. And then the front systems, got to tidy up cables and things, but we're starting to get there. So yeah, this is turning into quite a nice build. I'm enjoying this one. We continue the build, and we are now on step 18. And step 18 is all about that 3-speed transmission. And we're going to start to put this together. So need some parts from the parts bags, BC2s. So from bag BC, we need the 3x6mm screws. So that's these little chaps here. We need some from bag A, from bag BA, beg your pardon. We need a couple of the flange nuts, 3mm flange nuts. From bag B, we need a couple of these 2mm nuts, very small. And from the bag D, which is what we're now on, from bag D, we need a couple of the 2x6mm screws, which are these little chaps here. From the same bag D, we need a couple of these washers, 3mm washers. We also need, again, from the same bag, these 2mm E-clips or E-rings here. We need the shift forks, well, we call them selector forks in the UK, but shift forks. And we need also the MD14, we need this little shaft here, and we need a couple of the shift springs as well, all in that bag D. And also from the same, out of the kit, you need the selector shaft, which is this chap here. We need some parts from parts J, which is J1 and J2, which are these two clear parts. We need a couple of these MD17s. These are the rods that go through, and we need to make sure we've got the right end plate. I call it an end plate, gearbox plate. And as you can see, this is the one with the slot here as well. So we've got all the parts we need to do this step 18. A little bit tricky parts here, a little bit of greasing to do, a little bit of the locking thread lock we need to put in as well, and these little E-clips, these have got to go on the shafts in the right position. So here we are. We have now done step 18, and this is the gearbox system, the gearbox end plate in place with the correct orientation and the correct tubes, and the thread locking of the nuts into the screws into the tubes, and the thread locking onto the bar, the flange nuts, all done. That's in place. So that's that part of the step. And the selector fork system, where you've had to put the grease and the little E-clips and things and springs, they're all on as well. So there we are. So that's all in place. Correct orientation as well. If I move that out of the way by my hands, correct orientation as well. All right, now on to the next, on to step 19. So for step 19, we need some more parts. From our bag D, we need our MD18 shaft, which is this one. We need our, from parts bag BB, we need the 4mm E-clips, which are 6 of those, which is here. We need from our parts bag D, we need our 20 tooth, which is here. Also from bag D, our 13 tooth, which is this one. And also we need the gear hub short, we need this one. And again, just offer these up to the drawings to make sure you got the right one. But easy step, putting the E-clips in and putting the gears onto the shafts in the correct positions. And there we go, we have step 19 now completed. As you can see now, this is nice and easy step. Gears in the right place. You've got your, when you turn it around that way, you've got your 36 tooth on this side, and then turn it around to this side to do this side to this end, and you have your 27 tooth on this side, and you've got your 13 tooth and your 20 tooth, 13 tooth and 20 tooth on these, all ready to go. So there we are, easy step to do, done. On to the next. Okay, so here we are, we're on step 20. Now step 20, we need again our gear shaft. This one has a slight flattened end onto it, so you can just pick that out on the gear shaft. We need the E-clips again from bag B, 6 of those. We need also our gear hub long, we need 2 of those. We need our washer, which is this one, again all from bag D at the moment. We need also from the parts trees J7. We also need J8 and also J6. We also need our gears, which are remaining from the gear pack. And we got to put all this together, E-clips and everything else, and greasing ready to roll. And Yeah, and instant cementing the 1260 bearings. So there we are, we'll get that done. And there we have step 20 now completed, with the gears in the right place, the J parts in the right place, bearings, and the actual MD6s, the gear hubs, all sort of in the right place. And as you can see from the drawing there, that's technically what you've got in the end, and you've got some extra pieces to do on step 21, but there you go, greased and ready to roll. Just got to do the greasing on the gears, but that step 20 is now complete. So we are on now step 21, and step 21, we need some more parts from the parts tree, namely BC2s. We need 5. They're the 3x6 mils. We need their metal bearings, and we need our springs, and we need our components from the previous steps, namely our gearboxes and the frames, and some more components from the parts tree with the J components. And we need to put all this together to build up the gearbox cage. So that's what we're going to do next. So this is now step 21 completed, and after you put all of the gears, selector forks and shafts all together, you end up with this. And what we've got to do now is just put the grease on the gears, and we're there. But that's effectively that transmission gearbox in place, and it looks like a piece of art. Anyway, there we are, and there we are, nice and done. So that's step 21 all complete. So for step 22, I've decided that I'm changing the stock motor, and I'm having this Carson truck motor, which is a truck puller motor, and this is a lot lower turns, so it should be more scale speed. We need the motor plate for the motor. We're going to need some of those grub screws. We're going to need a washer. We're going to need the E-clips, pinion gear. Going to need a shift ball end, the shift arm, and a joint cup. And we're effectively going to be popping the motor into the gearbox that we built, and then we'll grease everything up, ready for the next step. So concentrating on step 23, we need to grease all the gears in the gearbox, and then we need to place the gearbox covers around the gearbox and secure them with BA3s, which are the 3x8mm screws, and BA4s, which are the 3mm nuts. And these are the two halves of the gearbox cover, which are parts B1 and B2. So first step, let's grease all the gears now, because we're going to encase the gearbox. So what I've done here is, with my trusty brush and my grease, I've greased all the wheels all the way around, and just all the way around the whole of the wheels and everything, just giving that a good coat of grease, and make sure all the gears, all the forks, get a bit of grease around them, and that should do it some good for later on. So there we are, so that's greased. Now we're going to put the case around it. So to complete step 23, we're going to take our greased gearbox, so here's the orientation, with our B2 part. I'm going to line that into the area. There we are. So that's, as you can see, that's lined there. Go. And take our B1 part and place that over the top to encase. So that encases it. And keeping that tight together, we're going to pop in the nut the M3 nut into one side and our screw into the other, and we're just going to literally tighten these up. And it's really quite simple, an easy step to do, and I quite this has been a really nice gearbox. This has been one heck of a gearbox to put together. So yeah, I've been really been nice. I've been studying how it engages, the forks engage, and how it moves, the forks move each of the gears to engage those gears. So it's been really enjoyable. So there we are. So that's now, we'll just go through and tighten those up. So I tend to do a sort of star action. Don't go too mad, just to tighten up so it's nice and tight. There we go. Nip, 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 and the top nip. There we go. So that is with our lovely truck pull, our Carson's motor, which is an 80-turn motor. Yeah, that's the gearbox now. That's step 23 completed. Step 24, we need a couple of the adjusters, the end adjusters, and we need they call it a crank rod, a shift rod, it's same thing. So we need to do this step 24, we need to pop these onto the rod, and we need to make sure we get the measurements right. So we need, on this side, we need to make sure that we're 17mm, and on this side we need to make sure we're 9mm. So with step 24, this shift rod, so we've got, in the drawing, we've got the end facing down, with the ball end facing down, and the ball end facing up at this right hand side. And I've tried to zoom in on the camera there so you can pop this onto the drawing. And the idea is I want to measure from, I'm just trying to get this point lined up here. So I've got the ball end, this end lined up on the 17, and I'm 17mm out. And the same again on here, I'm 9mm across. So there we are. So just pop in that, just move that across, just make sure I'm right. There we go. So yeah, there we are. And I don't know if the camera's picking it out. I'm sort of 9mm from the end of this face across to the 9mm. So we've got 17mm from the top and 9 across the bottom. There we are. So that's the shift rod measured in, and that's how I've measured it in, getting it right by the drawing. For step 25, we're going to need some BC2 screws from Bags BC. We need the 3x6mm screws, so I've got 4 of those. We're going to need our assembled gearbox and motor. We're going to need the shift rod that we done on step 24, and we're going to need the propeller shaft long, and we're going to be installing the gearbox onto the chassis and attaching the shift rod to the shift servo and gearbox, and the propeller long from the gearbox to the rear axle, or the rear axles. That's what we're going to do next. So to mount the gearbox into our chassis, so as you can see here, we've got our gearbox on the chassis, and the drawing sort of shows you to manipulate the curvature of these sections where the chassis rails are. My terminology is jiggle it a bit. So that's what we're going to do. So there we go, just jiggled it a little bit into there. There we are, and now it's in place. And what we need to do is we need to line up the holes that we need to use. So we're using these very last holes in the chassis and screwing the screws together, and it just about fits in there with this new motor with the wires. So I think that's going to look quite nice. So there we are. So I'm going to screw that together now, and then attach the propeller and the shift rod. So what I've done here is to just grease the gearbox, the drive shaft, just grease the ends. So I've slid one end of the drive shaft into the cup, and then the other end into the gearbox cup. There we go. And then maneuver the gearbox over the holes that I need. So now my drive shaft is in, and we're going to pop these screws into place. There we go. So I'll just nip those down, and there we are. And then all I do is, just to make sure they're tight, again, I always do a cross action so it goes down nice and tight. I mean, when I was working on my cars, normal cars, this is how we used to tighten things down. So it just makes life easier. So that's nice and tight, nice and tight, nice and tight, and nice and tight. Now we've got to do the shift rod. So I'm going to turn this around, and I'm going to collect the shift rod, and then what the shift rod needs to clip onto the ball joint on the gearbox, and it needs to go through there. There's an area here which is like a guide, if you like, where the shift rod goes through to, and you need to collect that as well. So it's a case of popping that on, and that'll be one end, and then got to get my fat fingers through it. Come on. And then there we go. So that's it. That's on. And it's in this guide. There we are. So that's step 25 complete, and that's bag D completed.